3. This one, we're going to end up setting up a proportion because we know it costs $24.93 for 12. It doesn't really matter which one you put that in, the numerator or the denominator. And we need to figure out how much does it cost. So that's going to be at the same level of the cost here. Make that some variable as 19. And then to figure that out, we're going to cross multiply. So whatever number is. I think that's 24, 30, 4, 73, 67. And then divide both sides by 12. So 39.47. And that would be in dollars. Questions there? Other questions on the shark bite? We have 3 more shark bites for the rest of the year because we're going to stop at 40. Alright, look at the notes on your desk. I know there's not many of us. We're just going to go through whatever questions we have and some that I pick and then be done with that. Make sure phones are put away. Make sure computers are put away. So then you're going to start running. Okay, so this is going to be very similar to our compound inequality. So if you are remembering that or keeping this in your mind, it will be very similar to that. So if we see something like this, absolute value of x is greater than or equal to 5, just like with our equations, we're going to have 2 cases. One where it's negative, one where it's positive. To create those 2 cases, you're going to drop the absolute value and keep one exactly the same. So x is greater than or equal to 5. Then you're going to keep x, flip the sign, the direction of the sign, and make the number negative. And that will create your 2 cases. But then we're going to graph this. So x is greater than or equal to 5 would be closed at 5 going to the right. And then closed at negative 5 going to the left. So interval notation, if I'm thinking with infinities, this keeps going to the left, so it starts at negative infinity. It stops at negative 5. It closes, so square bracket. Because this is pointing away from each other, this is an or. So we're going to put or in between. Starts again at 5, and then keeps going to infinity. So anytime you see greater than or equal to, you need to be thinking this is an or inequality. And then the opposite is going to be for less than or less than or equal to. So to create the cases, same thing, drop your absolute value, keep it the same, so x is less than or equal to 8. And then switch the direction of the sign and make it negative. But if I were to graph those, this would be closed at negative 8, closed at 8. Let's do this. And it would be everything greater than or equal to negative 8 and everything less than or equal to 8. So this is where they're going to overlap and be that and. So you really just need the places where it starts and where it ends, the overlapping piece. So that interval notation would just be, where does it start, where does it stop, from -8 to 8. And with your and cases, you could write it as condensed. Since this is the same thing as both of these. Questions so far? This part is so just so you see it, absolute value inequalities are really just compound inequalities, where less than or equal to is and, greater than or equal to is or. And then to create your two cases, isolate the absolute value expression just like with your equations. Create your two cases. You can use this mnemonic, or you can just remember that you keep one the same and then you switch the direction of the sign, switch the sign. And then solve both, and then graph it. So then let's look at 3 and 4. We'll do both if you want. We'll start with just doing one. Let's look at number 3. So if you remember that greater than or equal to is or, and less than or equal to is and, that will benefit you, but if you don't remember that, you could just solve it and then graph it and see what that does also. So if I was remembering, I know greater than or equal to is or. That way I can just be in that mindset. But regardless, I can just start to solve it. I would isolate it, but there's nothing on the outsides. So I'm going to drop the absolute value, keep one entirely the same, and then make a second case, switch the direction of the sign, and make the 6 negative. And then just solve both. How would I solve either? Add 1. So we have x is greater than 7. Or x is less than -5. Now, if you didn't realize it was an or at first, you would get these two answers, you would graph it, you would see that it graphs like this, and then you would know it's an or, and just make sure you go back and write the or in between. What's nice about these is they will either both be closed or both be open depending on the problem. So interval notation, just for practice, starts at -infinity, stops at -5, it's open, so just parentheses, or starts again at 7, goes to infinity, both parentheses. Any questions about that? Did we want to see 4? Okay. For 4, since I know this is less than or equal to, it has to be and. I could set this up as a condensed format. -7 less than or equal to x plus 2 less than or equal to 7. and then solve this like my compound inequality, getting rid of 2 by subtracting it everywhere. So that way, once x is isolated, I can just graph this. I don't have to worry about the overlapping pieces and look at -9 to 5. So those would both be closed with a line connecting them. Both be square brackets. However, if you didn't recognize that this was an and you made your 2 cases, solve them both, graph them both, you would see that they overlap, and then you would just need 1 line to show where is the overlap. So you could do it either way. Questions there? Look on the back. Find any questions you want to see Ju go over, and I'll just circle them for when we come back. So we will work on those 3 when we get back. Reminder, next class, I have to print out the review because I don't have it. But next class, you guys will get your review. We'll go over review questions, then you guys are quizzing. And then on Friday, we're going over the quiz and you guys are taking the test on these 2 things. Today and last class. Last couple of problems. Make sure from the rope. Alright, 4, 7, we have to isolate it first, get rid of the 3. How would we do that? Subtract. Divide, because these are next to each other, so they're multiplying. And then we have a greater than or equal to, so that's going to be an or. So you can't decide that until the absolute value is completely isolated. But now that we know that, we can drop the absolute value and create our 2 cases.
When you divide it, why does it affect the second of the brackets?
Because we're only dividing this and this. We're not dividing what's inside. Because that just stays the same until you drop them. So these would be your 2 cases. Remember to change the sign and make it negative. And then how would we start solving this for x? Very much you can see this. Not equals. And then divide both things by 2. We have x is greater than or equal to 1, or x is less than or equal to -9. If at any point you're dividing by a negative, make sure you change the direction of the sign. So x is greater than or equal to 1, close to the right, and then less than or equal to -9, close to the left. Sure. And then in interval notation, that would start at what point? Every type going to the left. Stop at -9 with at least parenthesis or square bracket. Or square bracket again. 1 to infinity. Alan, do put your phones on. Questions on 7? Number 8 looks like it's going to be be an and, but we gotta isolate it first to make sure. How would we get rid of this negative 2? Multiply it to the other side. So because we're multiplying by a negative, the sign is going to change directions. And now this is going to be another or, because it's greater than or equal to. So we can drop the absolute value bars and create your two cases, where one is greater than or equal to 12 and the other one is less than or equal to negative 12. I missed it. And then just like the last one, solve that by adding 8. And then divide both sides by 4. We have x is greater than or equal to what? 5. And what would the other one be? Or
-1.
x is less than or equal to -1. So both close. But going in opposite directions. Starting at negative infinity, stopping at -1, or starting at 5 and going to infinity. There should have been a parenthesis at the end of that, but it kind of got cut off. Any questions on that? In number 10, as is, this looks like it'll be an and, but I would solve it and make sure first, or isolate it first. What would be the first thing we do?
Multiply.
You could do that, but you have to multiply everything, so all the numbers are going to change. Yeah, you should do that first. So you can multiply everything by 2. Just make sure you actually do that. And you would multiply the 1/2, the 11, and the 15, so all of those change. Or just get rid of 11. Now, to get rid of 2, multiply both sides by 2. It stayed less than, so this is going to be and. So I'm going to drop my absolute value sign and then make my two cases, but I'm just going to make it condensed. -8 is less than or equal to 4x minus 4, which is less than or equal to 8. Now you can make the separate cases also, but I'm just going to do this to save space. Get rid of the 4, add it to all sides. And then get rid of the 4 by the x by dividing everything by 4. So if we were to graph that, they would both be closed, starting at -1, stopping at 3, with a line in between it. And that would be square brackets, -1, 3. What questions do we have on that?
How do you determine that it's and or?
So you could just remember the fact that greater than or greater than or equal to is or, less than or less than or equal to is and, or if you were solving it. So let's say you didn't know that one was and you just start solving it. You just create your two cases. So I'll separate it, but I won't solve it completely. We have 4x minus 4 is less than or equal to 8, and then the other one, change the direction and sign, make it negative 8, solve it. So this one would end up x is less than or equal to 3. This one would end up x is greater than or equal to negative 1. And then if you wanted to graph it, this will go to the left and this will go to the right. And then you would see, oh, this overlaps. I need that one. And then you would see it. So either way. Other questions? Are there any others on this page you want to see we go over and have questions about? So then for the rest of the class, you guys can practice from the notes, practice the Delta Math that's due on Friday, from what we did today or last class, work on previous Delta Math. If you needed to retake, you can continue to work on that. Let me know if you have any questions.